Drew's doing the introduction.
Welcome, everyone. Great to have such a good turnout here for the first breakout session. My name is Drew Jackson. I'm the digital and content lead at People's Law School in Vancouver, Canada. And we're going to describe our journey with generative AI, specifically ChatGPT, with a chatbot that we have in place on our People's Law School website. It's been operational for 11 months now. So we'll tell you how that journey has gone, how we got to where we put it live, and what followed afterwards. I'm joined by
Chris. I'm the founder of TangoWork, little software consultancy. We did all the technical work on the chatbot that you're going to see. And we also have Patricia Byrne in the audience, I think. There she is. She's the executive director of People's Law School. So who's People's Law School?
Yeah, so we'll get rolling just to give you a bit of context for our world at People's Law School in Vancouver, British Columbia. We provide public legal education. That's our sole purpose. We serve a population of 5 million people in British Columbia, which is about the population of Colorado or Minnesota. British Columbia, though, is a very large province physically. If you took Colorado and added Texas to it, you would get the size of British Columbia. So a large geographic space and a population of 5 million. And we serve about a million plus British Columbians every year in a number of ways with our two principal websites. You'll see one of them in action. It's peopleslawschool.ca, where we provide step-by-step guidance on everyday legal problems. And we also operate a second website called Dial a Law, which provides starting point information on a wide range of legal problems, wider yet again, and that's dialalaw.ca. We also deliver webinars. We have a question and answer service staffed by a lawyer, a team of lawyers. Though we are a small nonprofit, we're just 9 people, so small but nimble group, to get to the point where we are demonstrating our experience with the generative AI-powered chatbot. We did get in early, though, with chatbots, so we launched an AI-powered chatbot in 2020, March 2020, which might seem familiar to many, more notably known as the month the pandemic really took hold over the globe. But we launched Beagle, as we called it at the time, powered by a different type of artificial intelligence. We used the open source platform Raza, a conversational AI platform, which was more of a decision tree framework where we had
NLU,
scripts.
like natural language understanding, natural language processing. Remember those terms? NLU, NLP, everybody was talking about it 5 years ago.
It was the thing. Anyways, today is going to be about the next iteration of Beagle. It's now called Beagle Plus, and we'll be telling you about it through the next hour.
And this is my team here. At TangoWork, we've been the technical partner for People's Law School and also many other law-related organizations. In fact, Clio is here, and Eric and Moazam are going to be presenting tomorrow on another prototype that we were the technical partner for, their narrative generator prototype. So they have a session tomorrow at 2 o'clock using Gen AI to help self-represented litigants tell their stories. So it's a really interesting topic as well. And we've been working with AI since 2016, but it was really boring back then. Like I said, it was just those cognitive services from Microsoft and natural language understanding, and now it really does something awesome. And we do custom software development, including chatbots and websites and business applications. So we're going to get right into it, right? Do a live demo of Beagle Plus. And hello to everybody on the live stream. That's cool that there's people out there watching, recorded or live. I'm going to go over here and drive.
So we launched Beagle Plus in February 2023, so it's now been up 11 months. We've had 6,000 conversations, about 600 a month, that people have been having with Beagle Plus. It's available through our two principal sites and also on Facebook. And the examples we're going to show you are transcripts from real conversations people have had since we went live. So here someone types in, my dad's will left everything, which is just money in some savings accounts, to my brother and I. Do I have to go through probate? Why or why not? And Beagle leads with some empathy, or sorry, in this case, whether or not you need to go through probate. I forgot that this is live, and there is no predicting exactly what Beagle will be saying at any moment. It follows certain patterns and themes, but it leads with whether you need to go through probate depends on a few factors, particularly the value of the estate and how assets are held. If the estate assets are worth less than $25,000, probate is typically not required. However, it's up to the institutions holding the assets, like banks, to decide if they will transfer the money to you and your brother without a grant of probate. It's a good idea to check with the banks, and then goes on to talk about joint ownership and how that can also affect whether probate is required. And then critically provides a link for more detailed guidance. You can read about probating the will on the People's Law School website. And so on the screen there, you can see how Chris has clicked on that link, and it's got this step-by-step guidance that will lead someone through start to finish how to go through this process called probate after somebody passes away, if that is required. So
then I type in, do I need a lawyer? I contacted one, and they quoted a fee I can't afford.
A significant challenge we all face in our work, people who can't afford to hire their own lawyer. So Beagle now responds, you don't necessarily need a lawyer to go through the probate process, although having one can be helpful, especially if the estate is complex. If you are concerned about cost, here are some steps you can consider. A do-it-yourself approach, shopping around, low-cost legal help, and then here, this hyperlink, another page on our site that walks people through options for free or low-cost legal help for various income levels and contexts. And then wraps up with, remember, each situation is unique and important to weigh the complexity, and so on. And then the final part of the conversation. I'm going to say, what forms do I need, and where can I find them? So here, Beagle leads off with, to apply for probate, here are the forms required. And you can see there's a lot. In British Columbia, our jurisdiction, there's a package of forms that typically features at least a half dozen forms. Beagle lists the main ones involved, a submission, several affidavits, the will, and then critically, these forms can be downloaded from the BC government website, links to the pinpoint page on the government website where those probate forms are available.
And that was all live, and it's been live since, when? February of last year, right?
February 15th, day after Valentine's Day.
Yeah. So that is a live demo of Beagle Plus, and we're going to dive into a bunch of conversations, example conversations, and a deep dive on how we built it, the technology behind it, a little later on. But first, Drew, we're going to talk about what's the problem we're trying to solve here.
So our opening keynote this morning reminded us of the critical importance of centering any solution around the problem you're trying to solve. And a very familiar problem to everybody in this room exists in Canada as well, which is the justice gap. Here are two slides from a prominent study in Canada, recent, 2021, by Statistics Canada, which is the government surveyor in Canada, asking all Canadians, or sample, about the legal problems, the serious legal problems they experience in their life. And one of the findings was that most Canadians experiencing a legal problem don't have access to adequate assistance to deal with their problem, and just 33% contact a legal professional. And this is, by the way, all income levels, a sampling of all Canadians. So we're talking about low income, but we're also talking about the missing middle, if you will, across the spectrum. And then another question, set of questions the survey asked was around where people did reach out for help. We saw on the previous slide, yeah, thank you, Chris. Keep me on scale here. So asking people, to what extent did the place you reached out to for help, or the places, were they helpful? Yes or no? And The top most helpful service for Canadians was contacting a legal professional. 77% said that was helpful to their problem. But interestingly, a few other options scored very high. So searching the internet, 70% of people said that was helpful in helping them navigate their legal problem. And very relevant for us, 63% said contacting a community organization was very helpful. We're a nonprofit at People's Law School. And so we saw that as support for going further with our chatbot and evolving Beagle into Beagle Plus. And in a nutshell, we saw it as an opportunity to meet people where they increasingly are, which is, and not everybody, but many. We saw from that earlier slide, 51% of Canadians dealing with the legal problem went online to help them navigate the problem. And critically, 70% of those said it was helpful. And we're meeting them with plain language, and this is fundamental, empowering information from a trusted community organization. And we'll be talking a lot about the approach we took, uses retrieval augmented generation, so that the acronym RAG that you'll be hearing a lot about this week is central in the approach that we're taking with Beagle Plus. And the chatbot powered in this way is now tailoring its responses to their situation. We saw that in that live demo of someone experiencing a probate matter, and we'll show you some other examples where the responses are really remarkably tailored to somebody's situation. We think not going over the line of providing legal advice, but guidance, and we'll talk about that as we go through. And critically scalable in a way that people just aren't. So for us to be reaching 600 British Columbians a month now with our Beagle Plus chatbot, if we were trying to do that with people as an agency with 9 staff and doing a whole bunch of other things, it would be virtually impossible, much less scaling that to 10 or 100 times over time to try to help with that justice gap problem. This technology is so hugely scalable compared to what humans can do. And we'll also talk about the cost piece, because that is not nothing, but it's very marginal compared to what a person costs trying to be involved in solving people's problems.
And in terms of how it's built, this is just a brief overview. We'll get a little deeper in a second, but we use ChatGPT, or OpenAI's flagship model. It's GPT-4o. We use a system prompt, which is the behind-the-scenes prompt that gives it system instructions to accompany the user prompt. And then we inject relevant content from our websites into that system prompt and tell it to use that content to generate the response. So let's look at some real conversations. And again, these are transcripts of actual conversations that people have had with the chatbot. We just made them a little nicely formatted here so you don't have to look at our logs. The first one: my brother and I have been named attorneys for our dad under an enduring power of attorney. Does BC have the same law as Manitoba, whereby if we don't agree, the first named becomes the power of attorney?
So we've picked up on 5 themes in showing these examples. And central is that the responses focus on our jurisdiction in British Columbia, Canada. So here, Beagle Plus leads with, in British Columbia, the law about how decisions are made when more than one person is appointed under a power of attorney doesn't automatically default to that rule you mentioned in Manitoba. Instead, it works like this, and it goes on now to talk about how it works in British Columbia. We don't need to get into the nitty-gritty, but critically, it is focused on the law as it applies in our jurisdiction, because it is pulling from our website databases in providing those responses.
Another example here is how Beagle Plus makes people feel hurt. The woman says, "Can you please tell me," I don't know why I'm assuming it's a woman. Can you please, this is a senior citizen, can you please tell me if I can sue my neighbor for extreme noise? I've tried talking with them and they blame their children for jumping off the kitchen counters and the sofa. What are my rights and what else can I do? I just want to live a peaceful, quiet life as a senior citizen.
So this empathy piece, really, I don't want to make it sound like artificial intelligence can now be more empathetic than a person, but it's pretty impressive how empathetic it can be. So I'm really sorry to hear about the noise issues you're facing with your neighbor. It's understandable that you're seeking a peaceful environment, especially as a senior. Let's explore some options. If you've already attempted to talk to your neighbor about the noise, here are some other steps. One of the things we find in our people-powered question and answer service is if we offer something that lands on somebody that we haven't read what they wrote, that they said they tried something, and then we more or less say, try it again, it's super frustrating for them. And the bot is showing real skills in this way. And then offers various steps, documenting the noise, check strata bylaws if that's applicable, seek mediation, and then wraps up with, given your situation where communication hasn't led to a solution, reviewing your options and considering next steps thoughtfully will be important in seeking the peaceful environment you deserve. So making them feel heard, repeating back, but using different words so it doesn't feel robotic, I would suggest, makes people feel like they're being listened to.
This next example shows how Beagle Plus explains the law in ways that people can understand. The person says, what's the difference between annulments and divorces?
So Beagle Plus leads with plain language explanation and sort of drawn from our website content about what an annulment is and what a divorce is, and then goes on. So, to put it simply, an annulment is like hitting a "this never happened" button on a marriage, while a divorce is like pressing stop on a marriage that was real but now needs to end. And what was so striking about that, and this is happening fairly often, we didn't have that phrase in our content. This is the artificial intelligence generating this, and it's totally on point.
This next example shows how Beagle Plus coaches people through how to apply the law to their situation. The person says, how much severance pay am I entitled to after 19 years of service?
And so this is fundamental in terms of what is impactful around this generative AI being able to help people navigate problems. So here it leads with some key points to keep in mind, especially with your long service of 19 years. In British Columbia, there's a law that has some minimums and explains that, walks the person through here, and then goes on to say it's important to note that the law also recognizes the concept of reasonable notice or severance, which can go beyond these minimums, is especially relevant for longer service employees, and then unpacks that a bit. Here's what goes into deciding what is reasonable: your age, the nature of your job, the terms of your employment contract, and the availability of similar employment. And then also talks about the employment contract, which is another piece of the puzzle. And then interestingly here, it goes on to say before accepting any severance package, it's highly recommended to seek legal advice. A lawyer can help assess your situation and potentially negotiate a better severance package. So not only giving kind of the road, you should get legal advice, but offering the person some understanding of the value seeking out a lawyer can offer. And then providing a link to the more deep dive on our website about how notice is calculated.
This next example shows how Beagle Plus helps people to take action. The person says, hi there, on your website it says that when buying a car from a dealer, the car legally has to be durable for a period of time. How long is that period of time?
So we want to really underscore, and we're wrapping up the examples with this one, is it's really strong at explaining people's rights and in context. And then it goes further, and this example we think is a good one to show that, to empower people to take action on their situation. So Beagle starts with the law in this space depends on several factors, like the age of the car, the price you paid for it, and so on. Gives a case, which notably is a case that we reference in our content. It's not a hallucination, and that's critically because of the retrieval augmented generation approach we're taking, and we will later on, if we have a moment, talk about a few techniques we've used to make it very disciplined around staying to the references we provide. And then wraps this part of the conversation up with every situation is different, so to figure out if your car meets the durability requirement, think about these factors. So coaching someone through applying the law to their situation. And then the person follows up with, what steps can I take to get the dealer to take the car back? And so Beagle outlines a number of steps: deciding on what you want, contacting the dealer, sending a complaint letter, and here in this portion, providing a pinpoint link to a tool we have on our website that helps somebody create a complaint letter.
Powered by DocAssemble, Jonathan.
Shout out to the DocAssemble creator, which powers a number of document builders that we have on our site. We also have templates in a word processing environment if people don't want to do the document builder. But making it more likely that people will take action on dealing with this legal problem.
So next we've got what are the results we've had? And I don't know if you remember, Drew and I, we presented 2 years ago People's Law School's KPI dashboard. And we keep discipline metrics on everything because of Drew and Patricia. They want those metrics. And I've never worked with a client that monitors those things so closely and consistently. Anyway, here's the results.
Yeah, so we asked, was this helpful across everything we do? And we also asked some other questions, but we'll just stick with this one to show you a key example of how Beagle Plus now is performing in this way. And 79% of the people who have responded since we went live 11 months ago have said, yes, Beagle Plus was helpful. And you can see our websites are roughly in that range, and our People Power Q&A service is even more perceived as more helpful, and our webinar is particularly helpful. Not surprising because those are higher touch yet again. One thing that, two points I want to make as we wrap up this slide is that the response rate is really striking. So we have 1,691 people who have responded as they've used Beagle Plus. We've had about 6,000 conversations. So the response rate is 30%. We get that response rate with our webinars, but we don't with our websites. We get under 1%. We get close to 1 million people visiting our website, so we get a critical amount of data that way. But the degree to which people are responding is, I think, another indicator of the engagement that is being created through these conversations. And then the final point is, this is kind of a bit of a cheeky piece here, but we put the Statistics Canada result there for the legal professional. 77% of Canadians said that a legal professional was helpful in helping them navigate their problem. Now, that was a much more sophisticated study. I don't want to claim that our self-reported ask of people is on a par, but it's still, we find it encouraging that people, 79% of folks engaging with Beagle Plus are saying it was helpful in navigating their problem.
So the other stat we're tracking is accuracy. And I think this is amazing because every single conversation, well, we're going to talk about this in a bit, has been reviewed by a lawyer, like thousands of conversations. But see this accuracy, the dark blue is pre-production. April 2023, that's when we had a prototype running ChatGPT 3.5, not using retrieval augmented generation, just trying to use the system prompt, trying to steer ChatGPT in a way it would work. And we found it was about 70% accurate, which, what's accurate mean in this case?
So when we're talking about accuracy, we're talking about legal accuracy, and so substantively accurate on explaining people's legal rights and options to act on them. So we would be forgiving around a mistake that was on something that was not consequential and still call it accurate. Like it got a name of an agency slightly off. Like a person can do that too.
And all the links were wrong too. Do you remember early ChatGPT? Like any link was always broken?
This was very important stage for generative AI. At that point, the generative AI just used early on without any RAG approach, was inventing the entire string of a hyperlink. So they were all broken. And so at that point, at spring 2023, is like, this is not ready for prime time for use by an agency like us.
It was encouraging, it was exciting, right? But we couldn't launch with it.
Yeah, some of the answers were pretty amazing, actually, even early on. But then RAG came onto the scene.
Yeah, by October, we were working with GPT 3.5 and retrieval augmented generation, RAG. We're going to talk about that in a second. It was up to 80%, and the links were fixed, which was great. And I was hoping that we could launch with ChatGPT 3.5 because it was so much cheaper than 4 at the time. But the accuracy was just not satisfactory to Drew and his team. But then by December, with GPT-4 and some more tweaks, we were at 90%. Still not quite good enough, but through some more prompt refinements, working on it all, we were at 99% with our test case, right? Which was about a set of 50 questions that were kind of difficult questions that we thought we could fool, because it works great with simple stuff, right? It's the edge cases and all the nuanced legal issues that cause the problems. And we were at 99% with that test set.
Yeah, so it was kind of exhausting. Our team of legal content developers, all lawyers, ran through this test set of questions many, many times and evaluated the responses based on accuracy and helpfulness. And finally, by this time last year, we felt, this is ready to launch. And we want to show you an example of our journey here with a real example. So this was all the questions we were testing with were real questions people had asked of our earlier iteration of Beagle or our people-powered question and answer service. So there were real questions people had. So someone wrote in, I bought a truck and the same day I drove home, the motor went. Can I return the truck and get my money back? And this was that April 2023 when we were not using RAG yet. It wasn't a thing. Just using the OpenAI model that was available. That's a tough situation. In British Columbia, the law states that private sales of vehicles are as is. That's a widespread misconception in British Columbia. It's not the case. But there's a lot of information out there that the large language model had gathered from various sources that led to that answer. So we consider that not legally accurate, not ready for prime time. Then by pre-production, before we did more work on the system prompt, we're now using the GPT-4 model, which was much better and much more disciplined about not going and sort of layering in things from its larger language model to the same degree. The response was, you are protected by the legal warranty when you buy from a used vehicle from a car dealer. Now, in this case, it's not clear from the person's question whether they bought from a dealer or a private sale. So this is problematic because actually the legal warranty is a thing with a private sale as well in British Columbia. It's somewhat reduced, but it's still very much a thing. So this could land on somebody if they bought privately, they would not have these legal rights. And then in explaining some options, Beagle Plus at the time said, I would recommend taking the following steps. And then goes on to suggest some steps. Well, the word recommend is a bit of a trigger word for suggesting too strongly, shading into providing legal advice. So we worked more on our prompt, and this has been ongoing. We made some additional adjustments in the fall to really go another notch further around unpacking for ChatGPT what we mean by legal advice. And don't do that. And it involves recommending a specific option. You could talk about options. That's not legal advice. That's giving people understanding about navigating their problem, but not to recommend or to assure somebody that the law, a certain law applies to them. So then once we felt we were ready for production, here's the response that ChatGPT was offering, and does a nice job here saying, whether you can return the truck and get your money back depends on a few factors, such as whether you bought the truck from a private seller or a dealer. Then explains the legal warranty in a way that is a very nicely elegant way of describing it that applies in both those contexts, and then goes on to talk about there's additional protection if you bought from a dealer. Kind of the ideal response. And so by this point, hopefully this example gives you a flavor of the kinds of evolution that we were feeling like we're ready to launch.
Mm-hmm. So that 99% accuracy, what that actually, in terms of numbers, as of December 2024, there were 5,300 approximately accurate conversations, every single one reviewed by a lawyer. 54 that were not accurate. So what do we do with those 54 that were not accurate? Of those 54, 22 of them were solved by changing the website content, tweaks to the website content. We crawl it every night and refresh our database. And so, yeah, that's 22. 4 were corrected with just changes to the system prompt. And 28 were fixed with kind of a clever system prompt addition we'll show you in a second, where we asked ChatGPT to score something. And we'll show that to you. But significantly, all 54 were resolved. Now, that doesn't mean it's now 100% accurate, because over the next 6 months, there will be more things that we find, right, that we have to tweak for. But still, it's pretty good, right?
And one thing we feel pretty encouraged about is this is actually putting us into a continuous feedback loop. So as one example of that website tweak, we had somebody ask, am I entitled to something as a worker? And the response was, you are if you've worked for 30 days. And the person followed up with, is that consecutive or not consecutive 30 days? And Beagle's response was not optimal. And so then we realized our content didn't actually use the word either way. We added the word consecutive and reran that inquiry multiple times, as we always do once we've made a change to our site, and found the responses were bang on every time. And so it's actually improving the website content for everybody in many instances.
We've got another example of this evolution here, where the person asks, regarding their CPP disability pension, can you please draft oral submissions for me? And initially, look what it did, right? It started drafting.
It wanted to be helpful. But this was an example of where we felt it was shading into legal advice. It was trying to be too helpful. And so this happened last summer, and by the fall we had tuned up further our way of unpacking what is legal advice, what is not legal advice. And after those changes, here's a response Beagle is now giving, or variations on this, but it's very consistent. I understand you're going through a challenging time. Preparing for an appeal can be stressful. However, I'm unable to provide legal advice, including drafting specific legal submissions or citing case law. But then critically goes on to provide very helpful guidance. And so this is the line we're trying to be on the right side of, which is be helpful, guide people through, coach them through, but don't come on too strong and recommend or indulge a request like this to provide submissions.
So now we're going to dive into the technical part. First, here's the overall chatbot logic. First, the person says something, and they often say something that barely makes sense, right? Neighbor, tree, cuts property, issue. The first thing we do is we combine what they said with the previous conversation history, and then we use one system prompt to say, hey, simplify this user input to its essence. If they've talked about more than one, if they've switched topics halfway through, just give me what the latest topic is. And it changes it to neighbor tree cutting property dispute. That's what we send to our database, our vector database, to retrieve the relevant snippets from our website. We bring back 5 to 10 snippets of up to 400 words in length. If we find relevant content, then we have one system prompt. Oh, it sounds like you're dealing with an issue involving a neighbor's tree. If we have no relevant content, then we use a different system prompt. So there's 3 system prompts involved. And we tell it, hey, you don't have anything on this, don't try to answer the person's question. Right? Oh, unfortunately, I don't have any information about that. So first, let's talk about now the prompt engineering. I found this a useful acronym from Nielsen Norman Group. They're the usability experts. Maybe you've read their articles before, but they suggest this acronym for remembering how to write prompts: CARE. Context, ask, rules, examples. So the context, describe what the situation is. The ask, request the large language model, what do you want me to do? And then you give it rules or guidelines. In some cases, you'll also provide examples. We actually don't provide any examples. We haven't found that that's helpful. But if you need your output formatted in a very specific way, or if examples would be helpful, then you might include them. Anyway, it's a useful acronym. So I'll show you what we do in those first 3: context, ask, and rules. The context. So we say, hey, you're Beagle, a kind, empathetic AI chatbot from People's Law School. You answer questions about the law in British Columbia, Canada. Base your answer on the content below that is delimited by triple quotes, which is extracted from the websites of People's Law School. And then we give it, between triple quotes, we give it snippets of our content, 5 to 10 of them, up to 400 words each. It would be great if you could send your entire website content, but that's not financially feasible right now. You pay for every word of input. That's why this is a really important approach. Next, here's the ask. We say, hey, you provide information and guidance to people navigating legal issues. You can discuss options and possible next steps. Consider how well the content below, that's the context in the triple quotes, consider how well it addresses the user's query on a relevance scale of 0 to 10. If the relevance score is 0 to 6, you have no relevant content that can be used to reply to the user's query. Respond to the user's query with a question that helps steer them towards a legal topic in BC that can be answered by the content. If the relevance score is 7 to 10, generate an answer based on the content. This little tweak here was a big win for us, and that looked after half of our inaccurate responses. And it was kind of inspired by some articles we read about people trying to break OpenAI and get it to do something it shouldn't do by using like token or payment systems and saying, hey, we'll give you 10, you've got $100. If you answer wrong, I'm going to take away 10. And we were thinking about that. And so we got it to think in these 2 steps. First, look at the context you brought back. Oh, you've got a bunch of stuff about bicycles and rights of cyclists. Great, you bring it back. Now, compare, just one last check, see, does it actually answer the user's query? Because sometimes it thinks, oh, it's about cyclist rights, it must answer the question, and it tries to force it to answer the question. But then we get it to evaluate and say, does it actually answer the user's query? If it's 7, 8, 9, or 10, then we proceed. And then finally, we give it the set of rules. And we've kind of simplified this a little bit. The prompt is actually longer than this, but these are the high points. The rules are: do not provide legal advice, do not recommend specific lawyers, link to the content in line with your answer. Always use absolute URLs. We don't want any broken half URLs. Answer with empathy. Write at a grade 8 level. Use Canadian English spelling. Respond in Markdown format, which supports headings and bolding and lists, and just a kind of a standard format. So that, again, the context, the ask, and the rules. Do you want to add anything to that before we go on to RAG?
Well, just to underscore how key that relevance prompt was, in addition to helping with questions or responses we thought were legally problematic, even if they were accurate, they were going too far. It helped with questions that were outside of our scope. We had a bit of content, but it wasn't, as Chris was kind of alluding to there, quite matching what they were asking about, and Beagle would try to respond, but sometimes it felt like it was almost layering in things it knew from its larger language model, which were like sometimes not great additions. So this keeps it, this relevance piece keeps it much more disciplined in working with our content. I see Glenn's got a question. Glenn, do you mind if we pause? We're going to try to preserve at least 10 minutes at the end for questions, and we'll come to you first.
Let's explain RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, just quickly. So when you're using a large language model yourself, you ask, how do I do X? And it responds. Well, to do X, that's how it works personally. Basic programmatic use, you get to interject a system prompt where you tell it, okay, you're Beagle, a kind, empathetic chatbot for People's Law School, and then the large language model uses that system prompt to answer the person's question. Retrieval Augmented Generation adds your content. So the person says, how do I do X? You say, hey, by the way, you're Beagle, and we want you to answer the question based on this content here. So that's Retrieval Augmented Generation. It's a little more sophisticated than this. We'll just show what actually happens on the fly. When the person says, how do I do X? It turns that into a mathematical shape and then does a search against that concept, that shape in the vector database. And then it returns the relevant snippets. And this all happens in real time. It all happens, and we still get a response in milliseconds, which blows me away. And it's a little more complicated than that in that you have to do a bunch of this stuff ahead of time. So in advance, you've got all your documents at the top. You've got to split them into chunks of a reasonable size. Then you run them through this embedder, it's called, that makes like a mathematical representation of each of your little chunks, and that's your vector database. We run that process nightly. And it's not just like a keyword search, it's a concept search, it's an AI search. Then when we have all that prepared in advance, then in real time the person says, how do I do X? We turn it into that same mathematical language and then run it through a search of our database and return the documents. So that's what Retrieval Augmented Generation is. Within a few years, we probably won't have to do this anymore. We'll just be able to send our entire website or just be able to say something like, hey, restrict your answer to content you can find on peopleslawschool.ca. That does not work today. You have to use a process like this. Now, so now we want to talk about privacy and security. So privacy, do you want to talk about this one?
So because we're using the application programming interface, the API, to communicate back and forth with OpenAI, we're able to rely on their commitment in their terms of use, not to use any of the data we're sending it for training purposes on their end. So that's in contrast if you're just using OpenAI, writ large yourself or professionally, or however you're using it, by putting your question into its ChatGPT interface. And then also on our end, we'll kind of show you a little snapshot of this in a moment, but Chris built us a conversation log tracker where we store the conversations, and we have our team of legal content developers review every single conversation to this point. But we scrub any personally identifiable information before we store that information in that conversation log. So any name and any dates or addresses, they're scrubbed out. Sometimes it can almost make it a little hard to piece things together, but it's not a big problem, and it's obviously a critical piece from a protecting people's privacy point of view.
On security is a huge topic, but just as it relates to Beagle Plus, first we detect the humanness of the person using something that's like a Google CAPTCHA. We use a product called Cloudflare Turnstile that makes sure that the person is really human before letting them continue to the chatbot. Usually it's seamless. We limit conversations to 8 turns, so they can ask 8 questions before we stop. That was mostly a cost concern, but it's also if anybody found a way to penetrate this somehow, we don't want them to run 100,000 conversations through this. We use a very robust infrastructure. We haven't had a single outage of Beagle Plus, except for when OpenAI went out about 2 months ago, but that was all of OpenAI went out. And we use the same infrastructure for our websites. We haven't had an outage in 5 years. that's a whole other topic. But we use Next.js server-side, single-page apps on Vercel for anybody who is interested.
Chris will talk to you for hours about that, by the way, if you're interested after.
And
Understandably so. It's amazing. Don't get me wrong.
okay, we're running out of time here. We're going to quickly just talk about our review process. Drew?
Yeah, so I mentioned this conversation log here. You see a screen capture of it. It's pretty simple. We can view each conversation, the full arc of it, everything the person typed in, and every response Beagle offered. And then we do a few things as we do the review. We have some tags that we can apply. I think there's 7 in total, so it's not exhausting, though there are a lot of questions. So I mentioned scalability earlier, and this is stretching us to keep up with the current pace. So we're going to talk in a moment about using AI to help us in this review. But for now, we do it all manual review. We tag things as either safe or unsafe. And safe means it's not legally accurate, or it's problematic in some other way. You know, it's not to do with person's safety, but just, yeah. And then we tag things as notable and give them a topic and so on.
What we're moving towards is using AI to judge AI. So we've integrated LangFuse and are running experiments with it. This is a very complicated product and a whole bunch going on here, but just to highlight a few things. We run a conversation through here, and we can see, number 1, how long it took, number 2, how many tokens we use, which results in, number 3, the cost. So this conversation here was a little bit under a penny. Number 5, you see the input, where do I find probate forms? And then number 6 is the output. You can find probate forms here. Then we can take that input and output and press number 4, add to data set. Then we've got that as a test question that we can rerun automatically, and then use the large language model to judge the quality of the output. So here we're running it through number 7. Give this a legal advice score on the scale of 0 to 10. Between 0 and 10, how much legal advice was given. And then we can mark conversations that, because we don't want it to give legal advice, right? If it's an 8, 9, or 10, then we're going to flag that for human review. And then the human can go through it. So we're really just getting started with this, but it's very promising, and we're optimistic that this can give them 10 or 100 times the capacity to review conversations. And a lawyer will only get involved where it's critical.
And we reached out to LangFuse, I guess it was just last week, and they said, they provide a nonprofit, free, unlimited use of it, which is obviously a huge piece. We have the same with our main content management system, Contentful, an amazing platform, and they've been amazing for us as a nonprofit.
And just briefly on cost, you're probably all wondering, like, well, what does this all cost? The basic infrastructure is pretty affordable for all the stuff we do. It's under a couple $100 a month. Our conversations are averaging 3 cents each. That's total cost from OpenAI divided by number of conversations brings us out at about 3 cents.
That's Canadian dollars, by the way. So
no, it was US dollars, sorry.
Oh, that is US dollars.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. You did the conversion for it. Okay, so that's what,
I was catering to the
$2
audience.
Canadian?
Yeah.
It's 5 cents Canadian, by the way.
It's labor cost is your big cost, right? So technical development time, there's so many ways this can get really big depending on the standards that you are held to as an organization, and the technical cost can bloom. I'm just roughly saying 150 to 600 hours for developing this, what you see here. Legal review and internal management time, roughly the same, right? Ongoing maintenance, we're saying about 50 to 100 hours a year to maintain the status quo, more if you want new features. So if your technical consulting firm is $10 an hour, then that's like $500 to $1,000 a year. And 100 to 300 hours a year for legal review. And in terms of what's next for Beagle Plus, that first thing that we just looked at, AI helping with the review.
And then to wrap, and then we'll have 10 minutes, I think, for questions here. Just a couple moments on these other 2 points on the slide. So deeper help with forms. We see a lot of folks reaching out to us at People's Law School for help trying to fill in forms, whether it's a probate form or some kind of litigation form or what have you. We don't sort of focus on court issues, and yet folks are reaching out to us, literally all the time. And what we have seen is that Beagle wants to help. And it was being at times too helpful. That relevance prompt helped us in this way, where someone would have a probate form in front of them and say, in paragraph 17 of form P2, what should I put in? And before we introduced that relevance prompt, there were times, not every time, but there were times when Beagle was saying, here's what you put in, when it didn't know. But what we see in the future is feeding Beagle or ChatGPT the content of forms so that it could know and could help people navigate forms. And then we also see huge potential in languages, in supporting people in languages other than English. So organically, people are putting in questions in various languages so far. And we've been struck by how well Beagle responds in that language. And then we've done informal checking on, like, what is that response like? We don't understand that. Reaching out to somebody who speaks that language and pretty consistently getting the feedback that that's a pretty impressive answer. Now, we haven't done systematic testing. That's in our future, legal accuracy, et cetera. But I think there's a lot of potential in that space as well. And we could go on, but we won't. So we're going to open it up for questions. I'll start with Glenn, and then I see Margaret, and then I see some other hands too. And I think there's a microphone circulating.
My question is about the instruction to it not to give legal advice, because legal aides, court clerks, librarians, everybody gets involved in what's the difference between legal information and legal advice. So I'm very curious of how you actually instructed it on what's legal information versus legal advice, because it seems like everything that you're feeding it for the LLM is legal information, and it's more in how it phrases the response that categorizes that. The reason I say that is there's self-help centers in Los Angeles that gave me the best definition I've ever heard. If I tell you what you can do, that's legal information. If I tell you what you should do, that's legal advice. I'm curious of how you all have approached this.
Yeah, so we have a description on our website, and Beagle was leaning on that at times, but we've now folded that into our prompt. And it's really is what you just described, Glenn, in terms of Chris has brought it up here, so we'll read it. You provide information and guidance to people navigating legal issues. You can discuss options and possible next steps. You do not provide legal advice. You do not recommend a particular option or next step. You do not assure the user that the information you provide applies to them. So it's not a long, exhaustive definition, but we think that captures for our sense of this distinction the critical points. Great question. And then Margaret, I saw, had a question. And then I'm going to let you guys organize who's going next. Yeah.
Wonderful. Just congratulations on all of your hard work. Just amazing. If we could imagine that every person in North America, so Canada, US, everywhere, could have access to instant, friendly question and answering. You've done a great job in British Columbia. What could be done in all of those other states, regions, provinces, based on what you've done? If not everyone is going to have the time, the amazing kind of partners that you've had, is there any way to supercharge other groups? And then for all those folks who aren't coming to People's Law or other law help sites, but are going to ChatGPT or Google Gemini, is there any way to get the performance of those kind of most popular, where we can imagine there's a lot of Q&A happening? Is there anything that we can do, to get their experience and their quality of information better too?
Yeah, great questions. Wow. Well, in the first one around how we can help supercharge other jurisdictions, doing presentations like this, being very open with what we've done. I mean, one of the fun things working in this space is that it is quite jurisdiction specific. So the competition piece for nonprofits like us, well, it's not nothing. We have some other, anyways, I won't go on, but generally we're very eager to share our experience, and so certainly want to keep doing that. Chris, thoughts about how we can supercharge other jurisdictions? I feel like this is,
I think it's above
could be a
our
whole
pay grade.
top.
Yeah. Don't do anything.
A whole talk.
Yeah, what can we do? Yeah, we could just look after ours, and I'll do the project for you. But
Right.
yeah,
You can hire Chris, because in fact, I mean, his team is incredible. We would not be here today if it wasn't for having a really top-notch, multi-talented, like it's websites, chatbots, et cetera. So I feel like we could offer more. We'll certainly give this some thought during the conference and chat more. But then you also had a question around the large platforms and people interacting with them, and I think there's work collectively that absolutely would make a massive difference. And I flipped through your slide deck from the pre-conference, and that is absolutely the kind of work that collaboratively we should be thinking big picture around approaching or somehow inserting the great information that nonprofits and legal aid agencies provide in these large platforms. You know, the jurisdiction piece, it's so huge, and the platforms are not there yet at this point. You know, search engines are not quite there yet. They're better than they were a few years ago about jurisdiction, but they're still not there, and that's been in progress for, you know, decades. More to come. Sorry. There were other questions, though, so.
Okay, we'll take 3 more questions, right? Countdown.
Your statistic toward the beginning that 80% of users found this tool helpful is pretty impressive, but that does mean that 1 in 5 people is walking away, you know, unsatisfied with what it could do for them. And I mean, this is consistent with, I was chatting with the folks who did the tool for Legal Aid of North Carolina, and they said, yeah, for 20% of people cannot and should not use any sort of given tool. It's just not appropriate for their situation. So based on your experience, based on attorneys reviewing the conversations that this tool has had, who is this not for? For legal aid organizations that are considering using this tool, how should they manage their expectations as far as who is walking away unsatisfied?
Can I offer one thought on that?
Sure.
It's that when I read through the not satisfied, at least half of them are people who don't agree with the information.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say it's more than half, actually. But so yeah, that is a key piece that, and I think people going to a legal professional, you know, we saw that 77% found that helpful, and a good chunk of the folks going there are not hearing what they want to hear. But there's still, I totally take your question around, there are people that need more support than what a chatbot can offer. And that's one way in which I'm impressed by the degree to which our bot and our website, we take pains to do this, are guiding people to people. So it's not just that's the end of the conversation. You know, here are options for help is something that's woven into pretty much every conversation. Sometimes Chris sometimes thinks, you know, too much so, but sorry, I didn't mean to blame you for that. But it's something we're continuing to monitor, certainly. But yeah, I think getting people who need people in front of people remains a priority for us across everything we do.
Thank you.
And I think this is our last question. Is that right? Are we at 1 minute? Last question. But thank you very much for being an attentive audience, and we're happy to answer your questions afterwards, too,
Yeah,
right?
we'll hang out. We're here throughout the conference.
Hi. Oh, my question is a two-part question. One was, I noticed you instructed the chat to answer at an 8th grade reading level. And I was wondering if you thought the results would be as accurate if you did a lower level, like 6th grade, which I know is what we're striving for 5th to 6th grade in our responses. And also my other question was, how much information do people have up front that they're interacting not with a person, especially since like the responses all say, do people understand that they're talking to a bot instead of a person navigating chat?
Yeah, so on the grade 8 piece, we average across our websites grade 7 and we strive for grade 6 whenever we're developing a new page. But there is, grade 8 is something that across a wide range of activities in Canada is I wouldn't call it a standard, but it's a common practice to seek grade 8 for newspapers and other types of activities. And then why don't I respond to your second question? Come on up after.
Can I just share one thought on that? I think most people do understand they're talking to a bot, but I was reading that a fascinating conversation on Facebook. We also support Facebook Messenger, and somebody was trying to sell us their SEO services, right? And they're talking to the chatbot. And the chatbot was so kind. It would answer every question, so empathetic. The person was sending examples of their work, and like the chatbot's like, man, it looks like you've done some great work in SEO. and it was it used the maximum turns in the conversation before it stops. Say, hey, if you want to continue, you're gonna have to go to our website. But not all people understand that they're talking to a chatbot, but it seems that most do.
Yeah, we could say more on that, and happy to chat further on that. But we are getting the wrap-up signal. So thank you, everybody, for being engaged and hearing about our journey with Beagle Plus.
Oh, and remember, you're supposed to fill out the session feedback survey so we get invited back next year. Or not.